My body, my choice. Well, you've heard it 10,000 times. Let me show you where it breaks down, right? Is there any reason for an abortion you would call wrong? Any at all? Think about that. Because if my body, my choice is absolute, then aborting a baby purely because she's a girl has to be perfectly fine. It has to be. You don't get to flinch. And almost nobody will say that out loud, right? Because even people who march for abortion get uneasy at because she's a girl. And that's the whole ball game, because it means you don't actually believe the slogan is true or absolute. You already believe some reasons are wrong. You always did.
Welcome to the Patriarch YouTube channel. I'm Kevin, a father of 3 sons, husband to a beautiful wife, and most importantly, I'm a sinner who's convinced that Jesus is our only hope. Now, this channel exists as a diary for my 3 sons, but also to encourage our generation of strong men to love, fear, and bring glory to Jesus. And we want to do this by being watchful, being strong, standing firm in the faith, and acting like the men that the Bible has called us to be.
Check this out, right? Last year, I'm in India, I'm getting some checkups done, and I look up at the wall of the clinic and there's this sign, this big yellow thing in English and in Tamil. I've got the English and Hindi version here as an example to show you. It says, prenatal disclosure of sex of fetus is prohibited under law. So in plain English, it is illegal for the doctor to tell you whether you're having a boy or a girl. And I'm standing there just going, why would you ever need a law like that here? It's like rocking up to the markets to grab your fruit and veg, and there's a sign on the wall, you cannot buy or sell people into slavery here. And your first reaction is, well, yeah, duh, obviously. But the second reaction, the one, that kind of hit me was, hang on, why does that sign need to be here? In 2025, this was last year, who's the sign for? Because you don't ban something nobody's doing. That sign exists because somebody somewhere was doing it and they needed a law to make them stop. That's when it kind of hit me about the clinic. You only need a law stopping the doctor from telling you the sex, because without it, they find out it's a girl and they get rid of this baby. I just stood there thinking, wow, people still do that? Here in 2025? Now, 15 months later from that trip, I'm back home in Sydney and I'm finding out it's been happening here too. But here's what doesn't make sense. There's a law being debated in New South Wales, right? That's one thing. It makes it illegal to abort a baby because she's a girl. The laws around sex-selective abortions. That's it. That's the whole law. And it might be the most controversial thing in the state. Okay, maybe not as controversial as an article from the university that I went to that talks about this bill and what it could mean for pregnant people. People? I think the Faculty of Health at UTS mean pregnant women. So today on the Patriarch, let me tell you why people are furious about a law protecting baby girls and why we need to stand up for the rights of these baby girls. That's today on the Patriarch. So let me tell you what's actually happening, because sometimes the headlines are a bit confusing on this. So there's a bill in the New South Wales Parliament proposing to make it illegal to perform an abortion for the purpose of choosing the baby's sex. That's kind of the entire bill, right? And it doesn't ban abortion. I want to be really clear, because the other side will tell you that it does. It doesn't. And if this passes tomorrow, it's not happening tomorrow. I think it happens at the end of June. But virtually every abortion happening today is still legal. The only thing it stops is ending a pregnancy specifically because the baby's a girl or a boy. It targets the doctor, not the woman. The woman seeking the abortion faces no penalty at all. It's actually the practitioner, the medical practitioner, who'd be on the hook for this. Now, it was debated on the 3rd of June. There's a vote coming around the end of June. And here's a historic part, right? If it passes, it'd be the first time anyone's put any limit back on abortion in New South Wales since it was decriminalised in 2019. So sit with me here on how small this is. It doesn't touch the vast majority of abortions. It just says you can't do it because she's a girl. And that's the fight of the year, right? When the most modest possible line in the sand causes this much rage, the rage is telling you something. We'll get to that something in a second. Now, you might be thinking, what I thought, right? Standing in that clinic, sure, but these things happen over there in other countries, in India, in China, not here, not in Australia. Look, I thought that too, all right? Guess what? I was wrong. Let me give you the global picture first. There's a word for this that the United Nations bill this as missing women. Girls who, by the basic maths of biology, should exist and just don't. They were never allowed to be born. The United Nations number is 142 million. 142 million girls gone worldwide. Some estimates go as high as 200 million. But let me take the conservative measure to kick this off with. Let me just put that into perspective, right? That's more than 5 times the population of Australia just missing. Girls just missing. And if the government had raised 142 million people of one race, we'd call it a genocide. We'd build memorials. There'd be strikes on the street. But this is 142 million of one sex, and we mostly just call it a private choice. Now, here's how this normally works, right? Nature gives us slightly more boys than girls at birth, statistically speaking, about 105 boys for every 100 girls. It's been steady around that rate for all of human history. And then in the 1980s, we have technology that shows up, ultrasounds, cheap ultrasounds. Now, suddenly you can find out the sex early, and in places that prized boys, sons, the girls started disappearing. In parts of India and China, you get 120, 130 boys for every 100 girls. Up from that average of 105 boys for every 100 girls. And that gap is millions of daughters who are found and aborted. Now, here's what we need to consider as a country, right? And, speaking from our region as Aussies, researchers asked, does this travel? So when people come here from other countries, does that practice actually travel? And here's what they found. When people move to a country like Australia, in 2025, this research they did, 2 Australian universities published the answer. They looked at over 2 million births across New South Wales and Western Australia. And what they found is, crazy. When you take families where the mum was born in China or India, and you look at that family unit and third baby, after she'd already had 2 girls, the numbers are crazy. You stop seeing the natural near even split, that 105 to 100. You start seeing way, way, way more boys than girls, far more than nature produces on its own. And I'll throw the stats up on the screen as well as the link so you can look at this and understand this for yourselves. And there's only one thing that does that, right? Girls that are being found early in birth, in uterus, are not being born. And the same study found that those mums who were having abortions in early pregnancy at much higher rates than Australian-born mums, and it jumped right when the new early bud test arrived. So tests that can tell you the sex weeks before a scan ever could. That's what has created this skew between the amount of girls being aborted much earlier. And this is our birthing data from our hospitals. So it's not just made up statistics, it's research and our birthing data from our hospitals, which is crazy. Crazy, because the signs that I saw on a wall in India reflect also what's happening in this country. Now, let me be fair, right? I don't want to generalize anyone and everyone. Why would a family do this? Let's ask ourselves that question culturally. In a lot of cultures, a son carries the family name, inherits and looks after the parents when they're old. And a daughter is seen as someone you raise and then, you lose to another family. There's even this brutal old saying that says, raising a daughter is like watering your neighbor's garden. You do the work, someone else gets the fruit, right? It's brutal. And then you add things like dowries, where a daughter's wedding can financially, wreck or burden a family. And we can't just tell ourselves, this is just what the poor and uneducated people in those countries do. It actually isn't. Like, I've been to those countries that come from that culture as well. It isn't. Wealthy, educated families do it too. And the preference for a son runs deeper than money and deeper than the law. In fact, I want to tell you a story. When my mum was giving birth to me, was just about to give birth to me, and when she did give birth, she found out that I was a son. She was actually one of the very few in the hospital that wanted a daughter as a first child. And, she was crying to the nurse saying, I wanted a daughter. And the nurse was like, are you crazy? Every other mum here is doing exactly the opposite. They're crying here, praying for a son because it's just that important for them. And here you are crying in your privileged life, crying for a daughter. Brings me back to the trap, right? The obvious response is, what can we do? Should we let's just ban it, pass the law. And, India did ban it back in 1994. That's the sign I saw. It like stemmed from this law that was passed in 1994. That's the law that essentially they passed down. The ban did lead to more girls being born, so it did kind of solve the problem. But here's the issue: off the back of more girls being born, researchers found that most of these girls, well, actually, maybe not most of these girls, but it found that some of these daughters who got to be born under the ban were then neglected. There was less food, less medicine, less educational privileges because the family still didn't want this girl. Now, I did some time at an orphanage and refuge home where this was the case, and I saw this firsthand as well. And the thing is, a law can stop this procedure, but a law cannot change the heart that didn't want this girl. You can force the girl to be born, but you can't force a father or a mother to treasure her. We'll come back to this in a second. Now, I want to do something that you don't see enough of. I want to give you the other side's best arguments, their actual strongest arguments, and I want to try and answer these, all right? Because I'm not as deep in this space, but I just want to come at this from a common sense logic. So number one of their arguments, it barely happens here, so why would we legislate it? They'll point out that, one in nearly 16,000 abortions. Actually, in nearly 16,000 abortions, I think they said 13 were flagged as being for sex selection, and most of these were probably clerical errors. That's one of their arguments. The second argument is it'll scare doctors off. And this is kind of the crux of their real fear. They say it'll actually they fear that doctors will be thwarted into performing their duties out of fear of being penalized. So that's the second argument. The third is it's racist. Of course, one way to shut down anything is to say it's racist. One of the Greens MPs actually called the bill anti-choice and racist, saying that we're singling out Chinese and Indian families based on a stereotype. The fourth argument is it's nobody's business. The moment we get to interrogate why a woman wants an abortion, you've handed the government power over a woman's body. Now let's talk about these arguments, right? The first one, let's talk about the 13 and 16,000. And this number is from people self-reporting. Well, let me give you a common sense take on this. Okay, I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but who on earth would tick a box deliberately to say, I'm ending this because she's a girl? Of course, the form's going to say 0. I'm actually surprised they found 13. But the births don't lie. The forms can be silent while 2 million birth records, scream out at us. But here's a question that answers itself. If it genuinely ever happens, if it genuinely never happens, why are people fighting so hard to keep it legal? You don't go to war to defend a right that nobody's using. Come on, bro. The second argument, it'll scare doctors. This argument kind of touches on the side effect. It's not really an argument that killing a girl for being a girl is okay. It's the argument is the law might be messy. Fine, just fix the wording there. Simples. Even MPs who support the bill have offered to soften the penalties to handle exactly, this problem. Drafting this law shouldn't be the moral defense against this law. Third argument, it's racist. Well, this bill protects girls of those specific communities they're saying we're being racist against. The victims here are migrant daughters. So calling it racist to protect them turns the whole thing upside down. And notice this move that's being pulled, right? The data that we're showing is now the racist thing. But these births actually happen. Like this is statistics. These are what the stats are telling us. Naming what the numbers show isn't bigotry. Pretending you can't see it is just being a coward about it with good manners. And the last one, it's nobody's business. My body, my choice. Well, you've heard it 1,000 times, 10,000 times. Let me show you where it breaks down, right? And I'll do it with a question. Is there any reason for an abortion you would call wrong? Any at all? Think about that. Because if my body, my choice is absolute, then aborting a baby purely because she's a girl has to be perfectly fine. It has to be. You don't get to flinch. And almost nobody will say that out loud, right? Because even people who march for abortion get uneasy because she's a girl. My body, my choice because she's a girl. And that's the whole ball game, because it means you don't actually believe the slogan is true or absolute. You already believe some reasons are wrong. You always did. So the real conversation was never choice, yes or no. It was always which reasons and where's the line. Everybody draws a line. We're just, our side is honest with ours. And while we're here, my body, it's the one thing it can't be. That baby has its own DNA, its own blood type. Half the time, the baby's a different sex. The baby could be a boy or a girl. If it's your body, baby can't be a different sex from your own body. There are two bodies in this. The choice ends the second one. The baby girl never got a vote. And I'm not going to be graphic with you. I don't think shock value honors anyone. And some of you listening have lived this, and I'm not here to twist a knife, all right? But I won't lie to you either, because gentleness about the truth isn't kindness. So let me just tell you what's actually there. By the time most of these decisions get made, that baby has a heartbeat. It starts around 6 weeks. She has the beginnings of fingerprints forming. Later on, she can hear. She responds to sound, to touch, to her mum's voice. She's not a clump of anything. She is a daughter in the dark with a heartbeat. And the harder truth is this, right? An abortion later in a pregnancy is also not a gentle thing. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos or read about what actually happens in abortions later in pregnancy. It's a violent end to a baby that by then looks like exactly what she is. She's a small girl. And maybe that weight is landing on someone right now in a place and in a way that hurts. Stick with me, right? Because that's what the rest of this video is for. Now, where do I get the nerve to say girl in the womb has worth even when nobody wanted her? Where do I get the nerve to say that? Well, here it is, right? Genesis, the book of Genesis in the Bible says God made humanity in his own image, male and female. The image of God comes in a girl too. A daughter, ended for being a daughter, is an image bearer, destroyed for bearing the image of God the exact way he designed her. And the Bible doesn't treat the womb as a waiting room of a clump of cells before you become a person. I mean, Psalm 139 tells us, God knitted me together in my mother's womb. God's not watching this clump of cells automatically become a human. He's knitting a person on purpose with his own hands. And when Mary, pregnant with Jesus, walks in on her cousin Elizabeth, the Bible tells us Elizabeth's unborn baby leaps in the womb. Here's a detail that I love. The Bible uses the same word for that baby in the womb as it does the newborn in the manger. Baby in the womb and the baby in your arms. Scripture sees one person. Look, your worth was never about being wanted or being useful or being a boy. The womb is just an address. That baby girl is a person at that address. And if you've been with me this far, it's getting heavier and heavier, and I'm kind of pushing on some sores, maybe because this is your story or your wife's or your daughter's or a friend of yours, or it's a thing you pushed for once and never said out loud to a living soul. I need you to hear me now. The message of Jesus is not you are a monster. It never was. If that's the God you've been running from a God who doesn't exist. Here's the actual heart of it, right? And it's a verse that we love on this channel. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still in it. Guys, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Not after we cleaned ourselves up. Not once we earned it. In the middle of the worst of it. And that's when he moved towards us, to love us. The Bible says, for those who come to Jesus, there is now no condemnation. It says when you bring it out into the open, he's faithful to forgive it and wash it clean. It says he takes your worst thing and removes it from you as far as the east is from the west. And east and west never meet, right? Never meets. Think about a guy we talk about in this channel a lot in the Bible, David. David had a man killed, he committed adultery, and God still calls him a man after his own heart. Because David turned back to God with a broken and contrite heart, and God caught him. My friends, if there's room at the cross for David, there's room for you. Whatever you did, whatever you allowed, whatever you can't take back. And men, I want to talk to you specifically, all right? Talking to the lads. A lot of you are carrying sometimes a silent burden It may be a pregnancy, you ended or didn't fight for or walked away from. You've buried it so deep, you don't even let yourself think about it at times. You just put it there in the depths of your heart and your soul, never wanting to surface it again. Lads, I want you to bring it up. Bring it to God. Bring it to God, not in shame, but in repentance. Lads, shame keeps you hiding. Repentance opens the door. They're not the same thing, and, the devil wants you to confuse them. The cross of Jesus is big enough for this. You are not too far gone, and that is the entire point of the cross. It was built for the thing that you think is unforgivable, but the devil tells you is unforgivable. So I want to bring it home, all right? This bill that we've just spoken about is small, but the principle is enormous. And here's what I can't get past. A culture that calls itself the great protector of women, a supposedly feminist culture, is fighting to keep the legal right to end a girl's life for the crime of being a girl? That's not progress. That's a society that's lost the plot. A culture, in the words of the great Brayton Astor, is off its head. It's a job of men who fear God to stand up and gently, clearly say so. The law can force a girl to be born. Only Jesus can change the heart that didn't want that girl. So we do both. We stand up for the law, and we point every broken person to the only one who actually heals. So fellas, open your mouths for the ones who have no voice. Stand firm, act like men, and remember that Christ is king over our born and unborn kids, over the Parliament, and over this country, and more importantly, over the worst thing that you have ever done. God bless.
Yo, welcome to the Patriarch, time to take the lead. We ain't chasing clout, we're here to plant the seed. Men built to rise, not just to take a seat.